What's up, everybody? Welcome out to the show, our 6 o'clock live stream that we have here every Sunday. As you can see, we have a special guest here tonight with us. We have Jason Savage. He is, TikTok, pretty big on TikTok. He also has a YouTube channel called How to Heathen. His information will actually be in the details of the show for tonight. So if you want to go check out his socials, I'm also going to run across his socials across the screen here shortly. But we're going to have a pretty good show tonight. We're going to talk about the, bastardization of Vikings. And, how Hollywood has kind of altered the image of Vikings. And then we're going to get into tattoos because this is what our channel's about. We're a tattoo channel. We're going to talk about tattoos that are acceptable and not acceptable. Again, we're not the channel to tell you what to get and what not to get, but there are a few tattoos you might want to stay away from if you're not into that culture. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So
yeah, there's definitely images that are presented as sort of like harmless,
right?
That in fact have pretty problematic meanings.
For sure. They run the same lines as prison tattoos.
Yeah.
Well, we call them dog whistles.
There you go.
Because only a dog can hear them.
But before we jump into that, I want to make sure we sound okay. So give us a quick thumbs up in chat. Let us know we sound okay, that we're doing all right. I know that Jay may look okay. Me and Justin are our usual ugly selves. Thinner Justin, though. We're gonna have to start calling this show One Fat Guy and a Chubby Guy, but
somewhat overrated.
I'm gonna run out, do some business, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. So first thing I got on the plate is that's right. I will be at the Reno convention in May 30th, 31st, and June 1st. We will have a booth. We'll be interviewing. We'll be live streaming. It's going to be an awesome time. I already talked to the guy that runs it and spoke to him yesterday. So I have a lot of cool stuff set up and ready to rock and roll. Business is out of the way. Let's get into talking about Jay real quick. So
1 second. This is the last year of the Pagoda City Tattoo Convention.
I forgot. Yeah.
And it is, I think, hands down the best convention.
Not the best, but it's one of the best local conventions.
Yeah, it's the best. But, maybe the best local convention. And this is the last year. And if you get a chance, you should definitely go out. There's a lot of heavy hitters that don't come to the East Coast except to come to that convention.
There's international heavy hitters.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth checking out. It's in Reading, PA.
Reading. Yeah, I was just
August.
Do you know it off the top of your head?
21st, 22nd, 23rd.
Damn.
Thank you, sir. Man.
Yeah.
That's why,
That's why it box tattoos in review, bro.
That's why I just, it was a good guess, dude. I'm sorry.
It's probably in like June.
No, I actually didn't. No, you know what? Because I just saw it the other day, and I did want to bring it up.
It's Buck's world. We just live in it.
No. Come on, man. Anyhow.
It's his business to know the tattoo business.
So, Justin and I have known Jay prior to YouTube and TikTok days. Jay and I happened to start our YouTube channels right around the same time.
Yeah.
And Jay kind of got more focused on TikTok. I got more focused on YouTube. And we definitely didn't go our different ways because we still would call each other and bounce ideas and stuff off each other all the time. But, you got huge on TikTok.
I mean,
much bigger than
I am on YouTube. Like, I don't call it huge yet. Like, you know what I mean? It's like as of this morning, the last look, I think I had 71.1 thousand followers.
That's big in my book, dude.
Yeah, I don't know.
I would love to have that on YouTube.
I would too. It pays a lot more.
Yeah.
It definitely does.
Jay is trying to really crank out his YouTube channel as well. So,
yeah.
I wanted to do an episode on Viking tattoos. I was actually going to do like a history breakdown episode, and then I realized that there's really not a lot of history, and we're going to get into that tonight because TV movies have pretty much set this false expectation of what Vikings look like, and it couldn't be any further from the truth. I would have to say the Vikings show probably was pretty close, but the fact is, those guys were all covered in tattoos, and there's actually no historical facts that back up to any of them being tattooed.
Well, let me hop in on this real quick. So first off, Vikings were what we call the Viking people now, modern times, right? Ancient Scandinavian culture. They were seafaring. They were, they were merchants. They were raiders. They were traders. They were craftsmen. But they were brightly colored. Like they wore very bright greens and yellows, and because that was the dye that they had available in Scandinavia at the time. They didn't wear a lot of black leather. They don't, leather was reserved for battle. It was reserved for armor. They also, what we know today as like the modern knight, those helmets were developed from, they were developed from the Scandinavian warriors, from the Vikings.
Right.
They had no horns. That's a complete myth. That was made by Wagner during the Romantic period. Wagner, yeah. That's the right pronunciation of it. But it was, it was made in an opera, and it was just to this who was the bad guy, and that's the reason that the horns were put on there. It was by a costume designer. His name escapes my head right now, but it was the name of the play was German, something German or Germany, or but it was spoken in French, and yeah, it was like something Germain. I don't remember the name of it like completely, but that's where like the whole idea of helmets. So the whole idea of like leather, it was mostly chainmail. It was mostly, their armor was mostly chainmail. Yes, absolutely. The one thing the Vikings did get very accurate was the shields.
Yeah.
So their shields were done.
And the boats.
The boats, absolutely. Well, the boats that's what made them be able to be what we know today in history.
So get into the whole word Viking.
So the word Viking actually it was made in the Romantic era, and it was to describe. So we call it the Viking age, right? And that starts in that starts at the raid on Lindisfarne Monastery in 793 CE, and it ends in 1066 at the Battle of Stamford Bridge with the lone berserker holding the choke point at the bridge, right? So the guy held off like 150 English warriors, and he had 2 battle axes standing in a bridge. Some people say he was, he was whacked out on pizza toppings, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that they could get him was that they had to have a man go under the bridge on a boat, and they had to, jab at him with a pike. And that was the only way that they were able to stop him, because he held the bridge for legend says he held the bridge for a fortnight, which is probably the equivalent of like 8 hours today. Like just swinging and going, that ended that's the technical end of the Viking Age. But it was the raids on English soil. It was the raids on Christian monasteries in the beginning, and everybody equates Vikings with, today we use the term Norse pagan, right? But that stopped in the mid-800s with Ivar the Boneless and the Great Heathen Army. They were the last ones to believe in the old gods, and the Vikings raiders from then forward were mostly Christians.
Right. So, and we'll get into that in a bit when we talk about tattoos that are fact versus fiction.
The word Viking means it's Viking, and it has a masculine and a feminine in Old Norse. The masculine means to be from the bay. We know that today in Iceland, somebody's from Reykjavik, right? That's from the Bay of Rhea. And, that's what it means translated into English. And they're a Reykjaviking. And that's what they're called even today in the modern era. They're still called someone who's a Viking. So someone from the bay or leaving the bay is what the other one, Vikinger. And that's where people say, oh, it was a job. It wasn't a job. It just meant to leave the bay. It could be to sell merchandise. It could have been to go fishing. It could be to go on an adventure. We associate it today with nefarious intent. We associate it with these raids, with them going to get gold and silver from the monastery and capture people and bring back thralls and go get women, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And go grab a wife. That's why you don't meet any ugly Scandinavian people. because they, when they got off the boat, they got to pick like 3 women to bring back with them. You're grabbing the hotties, bro. Like you're grabbing the dimes.
Yeah, but we can we can go a whole different route with that as well.
Right, but that that's the joke that's behind that. But
so a lot of what they understand, even about the Norse language today,
a lot of it is modern English.
Is retrograded from modern Icelandic, right?
80% of modern Icelandic. See, Iceland is extremely proud. And Gooms, if you're watching, I hope I get this right. Modern Icelandic is extremely proud of their heritage with the language.
Mm-hmm.
He's watching. Awesome. That's my brother. And if anybody knows what the poetic and the prose edda, that's like Snorri's grandkid, 23rd generation. But it's modern Icelandic is like 80% of the Old Norse language. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and the Old Norse language, it didn't change. Icelandic didn't change. Like today, like the word, like I think it's computer. He was the one that what he told me is the word computer is computer. So like if a new invention comes along, electricity, and they don't make a word for it in Icelandic. They use whatever word's being used. Like, mm-hmm. They have their way. And the thing with the structure of the Icelandic language is one word can have 5 different meanings. And I'm not talking there, and there. We're talking like tree, boat, rock, and curb. But it's the 3 words that come before it that make that meaning. So it's one of the more difficult. Like I'm trying to learn it. It's extremely difficult. So I gave up with Icelandic and I just went to Norwegian.
So to be honest with you, man, I mean, I was going over my notes today and, with the bullet points that we had set out for the show. And I was actually trying to, pronounce some of the words and stuff like that. And I had to use a damn translator because I was like, I was not even close on some of those words. Yeah, no. Which is crazy, but we'll get into that as well.
Like I say I have a linguistics department. Like I joke around with it. Like I have, friends that are, native Icelandic speakers, and I literally use audio on Messenger, and I'll go back like 15 times until I get the word right, Yeah. And it's difficult with my thick Bronx accent. It's even worse,
Yeah. So, as you can tell, Jason has spent a good, amount of time studying this stuff, and he is actually, written a book where he's trying to do a modern twist on some of that stuff and putting it in his own kind of style and his own wording. But we're here for the tattoos part as well. So let's get into that.
Well, let me plug the Modern Havamal. So the Modern Havamal, the Havamal is the first poem in the Poetic Edda, and it translates into the Songs of Iwan. So there's numerous translations of it, but what we forget about the Norse mythology is that it's written in poetic language. It's poems. So I took the essence of each one of the stanzas and I wrote a modern English poem to it. And the link's in the description. And and there's a link in the description. It's available on Amazon. If it's you pick it up, it's not too expensive, and it helps pay the bills, and it funds the upcoming documentary American Heathen.
Thanks to Bill O'Connell for the $5 super chat, much appreciated. On the bottom of the screen, I actually have all of Jason's socials running, his YouTube channel, Instagram, and TikTok. So it'll also be in the description of this episode. So if you'd like to check out his stuff and hit him up on his channel, feel free to do that. Let's get into the tattoo. I wasn't going to skip over that. I was actually going to save it to the end and give you a little bit of extra time.
We'll throw it at the end, too.
We'll throw it at the end, too. But anyway, so, this whole theory about Vikings and that they, painted people. Well, painted people was more about
it comes from one thing.
Yeah, the dyes and whatever that they have on their faces, not tattoos.
So we don't know. So here's the thing. Okay. So like I love to believe that the Scandinavian warriors were tattooed. Okay. But with that being said, there is no historical evidence that we know of. But we do know of other body modifications. So like it's not like it's out of the realm. They were travelers. Like I would love for it, but we've come across combs, we've come across ear picks, we've come across, all these archaeological finds, but there's one find in, I think it's Sweden, where they may think it might have been possible for it, but there's no definitive historical evidence. So unless there's definitive historical evidence, we don't say it. But people will go back to this one line in Ibn Fodlan in the far north. So if you guys don't know who Ibn Fodlan is, he is the movie The 13th Warrior, right, with Antonio Banderas. He was an Arab traveler that spent time with the Rus Vikings. So the Rus people, which were more like towards the the Russian area. He spent time with them. And in one thing, he said they were hulking, massive men painted with trees and flowers from knuckles to shoulders. We don't know if it was paint. We don't know if it was, it doesn't say anything about it being permanent. It's if anybody's an Arabic speaker and an Arabic scholar and they could translate it and it says something where it's permanent or it wasn't permanent, we don't know if it was a dye. We don't know if it was similar to henna. We don't know what it was.
But I have a copy of it upstairs.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Afterward, if you want to look at it.
Yeah. So I have one too in my house.
So it could be ash, berries, making dyes, any of that kind of stuff.
So the Picts from the northern part of the British Isles, they definitely painted themselves blue.
Right.
And they used an ink called woad, I think.
Okay.
So there were people that did that themselves.
Right. And we also, they had the Varangian Guard. So you had you had men that were ex-raiders that were they were in Turkey, what I mean? They were in Istanbul, and they, we found
bodyguards.
We found runic graffiti for the Turkish king, right? With the Varangian Guard, and we found runic graffiti, and it was just I think it translates into Ivar was here, some modern day shit, you know what I mean? You would do some modern day writing, me and you would do,
Yeah.
And he wrote it on the side of a fountain, you know what I mean? But it was written in Elder Futark. And younger Futark it was written.
Yeah. So thank you to Sarah for the $5 super chat.
Hey, Sarah.
So let's
Chris.
Also Chris Hawkins with the $4.99 super chat. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. I actually have some slides that we're going to pull up, and we're going to start off with the easy stuff, the runes. And then we'll go forward.
The runes, there's 3 Futarks. So there's, and Futark stands for the first 6 letters in the alphabet, right? Be'uz, Uras, Durasaz, Anzus, Raidho, Kanas, right? So that's where that comes from. But the younger, everybody loves to do the Elder Futark, and that comes back from Odin, and that comes back from the Poetic Edda, and it comes from Odin sacrificing himself on the tree for 9 days and 9 nights, and he grabs into the well,
screaming, I took them.
Right?
Screaming, I took them.
Screaming, I took them.
Yeah.
Screaming, I took them. There's some translations that screaming, I thrust them. But dramatically, he grabbed them out of the water, and he was given the knowledge of the universe. But we assume it was the Elder Futark. It's not in the book. It's not in the stories. But at that time, when these stories were written, that was the alphabet. That was the alphabet that was being written. That was their way of marking something.
So at this point, I mean, if we're looking at these runes, right? These would be considered to be factual, acceptable tattoos.
Yeah, but some of them can say I don't know how to put this correct. So people like to do the whole bind rune thing. We have no evidence that was a real thing, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have some other...
So we'll talk about the most famous bind rune of all is the Bluetooth symbol, the Bluetooth logo.
Everybody's seen it.
And that is the Nordic H and the Nordic B, and it's Harald Bluetooth, right? Because it's named after the Viking king Harald Bluetooth, who united Denmark and Norway, and that's why Bluetooth technology unites PC and cellular technology, right? So that's why they named it that. John Matheson and Sven Matheson and John something were the 2 developers. They were out having a beer when they came up with the name, right? So people put together.
That's all good things are.
Right?
As all good things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially all good things Viking, right? There's meat or ale involved. So I'm looking at this is part Elder and no. And Zeus is okay. Yeah. So there's there's some runes in there, right? So the Othala, right? That's the one that kind of looks like a fish swimming upwards, right? There's one that is, a lot of people get that tattoo, right? Means family protection, right?
I have that tattoo.
But then you put wings on it, and now it becomes a little
something
mustache
different.
man.
Yeah.
Now it becomes a problem.
Yeah, so we'll have a picture of this, and we'll run off it real quick. But
so also with the runes, what you have to understand is
it's a writing system. It's phonetic. It's a phonetic alphabet.
Is that like in the 70s, this guy Bloom wrote a book called The Book of Runes, where he basically added all these metaphysical meanings to them.
Yeah.
But if you look at like just,
it goes even further than that, bro.
If
It
you
goes
look
back
at-
to Guido. It goes back to Guido von List.
Yeah, he created his own set.
Yeah.
But if you
late 1800s.
If you look at the purely scholarly and intellectual
Right.
evidence that they have, they will all say that it really was just a language.
Yeah, it was a written phonetic language,
How do you say it? Like, one of the big mysteries about the runes is how come they didn't just use the Roman language or the Phoenician or Greek language. They actually created their own language because, the Germanic people at the time were strong in their own identity.
Right.
They weren't going to borrow
from somebody else.
It also did it. So, like in the migration period, so many other things came north except for the alphabet. Like they created their own, and some attributed back to the magic voting, right? And that, in the stories. So the stories that we know, the poetic and the prosaic, these were ways of educating and entertaining around the campfire at night. So they would sit around the campfire, and the elder would, tell these elaborate dramatic poems, and the next thing that's how they were able to learn and learn, and keep their heritage and their history. Oral tradition, we call it, right? So the oral tradition is that the words were magical, the runes were magical, but the runes were kind of magical back then. Because if you can listen, if I can read it and you can, I'm magical.
Literacy.
Literacy would be considered, magical.
Yeah, if I have a piece of parchment that I can't understand,
right,
and Buck gives it to me, and I bring it 10 miles to you, and you understand it,
I'm a wizard.
Yeah, you're a wizard.
Exactly.
Right. You are a wizard, anyways.
I appreciate.
At this point, you have people that are getting the Volknot.
Well, that's well, the Volknot. See, here's the thing with the Volknot too, right? So the Volknot is somewhat modern, but it's based off of one ancient symbol. So we have one ancient rune stone. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but the one rune stone is attributed to a 10th century occult devoted, right? And that is in there, and that's in a story that's in the runestone, and there's a lot of unaliving that is visual in there. There's a lot of unaliving worship, right? That's the way we'll have to say it.
Can we say funeral?
Sure.
Yeah. It's a funeral.
It's a funeral rite, or at least they sort of think it's a funeral rite,
right? And that's the only time we see it historically. Before like the 4th to 15th century.
So let's get into this one because I've actually seen this tattoo numerous times.
The Viking compass.
And from my understanding, that's
17th century stave.
It's not even accurate.
No, so this is a very common, very, very common modern tattoo on people that they call it the Viking compass, right? But it's an Icelandic stave. So it was. It was a Christian bishop that wrote this from the Galderbrook. It was like Bryce Bjorfinson was the bishop's name, I believe. I'm not 100% accurate on that, 100% positive on that. But he wrote this book of magical Icelandic staves, and this was supposed to be a way to find their way home. So but here's the other thing too, is like, as Americans, we don't get Icelandic culture. We don't understand it. We really don't. Like
we're ignorant to a lot of cultures.
But here, you're either Christian, you're Jewish, or you're Muslim, right? Or you're something else, right? Whatever you are, there's a title to it. In Iceland and in Norway and in Iceland and in all the Scandinavian countries, like there is it's heritage, it's embedded. So like Gooms, who's in the chat, told me a story, and it's one of the coolest stories ever. Like, he was marrying a woman, and at that time he was, following the Christian religion, and he was going to church to speak with the preacher, and the priest is standing there, and he's telling him like, "Hey, these are the rites, and this is the marriage rites," and it's pouring and thundering outside, and he turns and he's like, "Oh my God, Thor is pissed tonight," and it's a Christian priest,
Right.
So like, it is part of their culture. Like, we're here, like, we don't get that, so like. We see these staves, and that the Vegmasphere looks runic in nature. It has that straight
Looks
line.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it's
definitely looks
straight
cool.
line. Right.
And
absolutely.
I'm not saying it's a beat tattoo.
Yeah, just
but-
don't run around saying it's a Viking compass and I got it from my
Exactly.
great grandmother.
And that's
You
the
know?
only thing I'm getting at with this is like we started out this episode tonight is, you know, Justin and I have always taken the position of, hey, look, we're never going to tell you get this, don't get this, because we're not those guys. We don't do that. But if you want to be authentic,
I mean, don't get a Swazi. Like,
yeah,
don't.
That's something that, you know, is frowned upon no matter what you're talking about.
Who would ever get that?
But what I'm saying though is that there are people out there that are under this, you know, guise of thinking that, oh, I'm getting this Viking tattoo, and it's not. It's some shit that's made up in the 1700s by some random dude.
And yet it's adopted in modern day, you know, like, and here's like another thing is a lot of Nordic and a lot of Norse and what we call today Norse paganism, you know, whatever you call it, Norse pagan, Fun Seed, Asatru, those are all modern names. What was the name for their spirituality back then? There was none. It was their culture. It was the way that they lived. Like they didn't have a name. Like it wasn't like, hey, I'm a Baptist or I'm a Lutheran. You know what I mean? They just it was what it was.
They lived in the spirit.
Your guy Gumsy just said we'd gladly share the Vigvisar.
The Vigvisphere, yeah. It's a national Icelandic
as a cultural symbol.
Right.
Just respect it for what it is.
Right.
And
it's not Viking. It's a Icelandic cultural symbol.
Right.
Absolutely.
So and this is, you know, what actually kind of got me going on this was, I don't know the guy's name. And I should have wrote it down. I'm sorry. I apologize. But there's a Icelandic or Phoenician tattoo artist. That's on Finland.
Oh, yeah. Phoenician is, bro, that's like freaking Middle East, dog.
So what do you call people from Finland?
Finnish.
Sorry.
Like finish line. I was like,
Finnish,
bro, you're on your wrong side. One has glaciers, one has dunes.
Either way, he's one of those guys.
Right.
And he's obviously has the thick accent, and he does tattoos. And he was going down the list of, you know, people that are getting these crazy ass tattoos, and some of them were tattoos that were created by the angry Germans during World War II.
Absolutely, a little mustache man.
Yeah. And those people didn't even know that that's what they were getting.
Right. There's a girl right now on TikTok. There's a girl on TikTok that went viral like 2 weeks ago. I'm talking like 20 million view video. She got a problematic tattoo. She got a hate group. First off, the girl is part of the Rainbow Mafia. She is LGBTQIA, and she goes and gets a tattoo that she Googled on the internet real quick, like Norse protection tattoo, and she grabbed the hate group symbol. And she's got it tattooed on her foot. And she's like, now when if I go to the beach, like, I'm going to be like, hey, why is this guy really looking at my foot? And it's what we call a dog whistle. It's something that, you know, people, hey, I have those same values as you.
And now, so now there's going to be people walking up to her
that are absolutely
in her camp.
That are absolutely on the wrong side of the field.
That are going to be like, hey, we're buddies. And no, we're not.
No, we're not. Right.
Yeah. So.
And see, one of the things that people have to understand about any of these symbols is that they did live, it was an oral tradition, and Christianity absolutely did everything in its power to destroy it.
Well, see, that's the thing with the Codex Regius. With Snorri's, so the Codex Regius, right? The Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda, Snorri's version of it, right? Disappeared like a fart in the wind for 300 years.
Right, it had to be hidden.
Right. So there is a huge amount of evidence and theory that Snorri worked with the Knights Templar and that he gave them that to hide in the Vatican, which it was discovered in the 16th century in the back of a bookshelf by a bishop.
Right.
But he gave that to them to hide so that it wouldn't be destroyed, because it was like the only written copy of the old gods, right? Or what people thought of their spirituality, of their gods at that time. And in exchange, he gave the Knights Templar the route to the New World, because that's how we found, through the Icelandic sagas, that's how we found Leon's Meadows. So we found the Leon's Meadows, which is the Vikings that landed in North America up in Newfoundland. We found that there was a couple in the 70s that followed the Icelandic poems, and that's how they actually found it. You know, there's some people think that the Viking settlement of Hud was New York City, where, you know, the way that the bay and the harbor are described inside the poems, it actually absolutely describes the Long Island, coastline, and it describes that. But we'll never find that out. There's been so much, any archaeological evidence on that is wiped completely clean.
Yeah.
It's gone. There's no way of finding it.
It's been
Except
gone
there was
for-
supposedly maybe one rune stone that was found and was in the New York Times in like the 1920s, 1920s. An editor in the New York Times found the stone as he was walking by, down the Hudson River, and he swore it was a rune stone, and he knew a little bit about rune stones, But so the poetic edda wasn't really touched. So Snorri was a Christian, absolutely, but he was a Christian politically. His biological father was a pagan. His biological father was actually assaulted in Parliament and tried to have his eye removed by a Christian woman so he would be like his hero Odin.
Mm-hmm.
There was an actual documented assault, and then he was kind of, because his biological dad really couldn't take care of him, he was given to a man. I don't want to say given, but he was raised by a man who was a Christian, and he became a Christian at like 14 years old. Back then, you're a full-grown man when you're doing that. You know what I mean? And they say it was more of a
you're getting married in 2 years.
Right? Yeah. You're already like planning weddings at that age. You know what I mean?
Unless you're a girl.
But even you were married, but if you were a female at that time,
you're already married.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
So if that's all right, and I think that the most people understand that Christianity tried wiping out the whole pagan.
It did, but it didn't. It did and it didn't. Some of it, a lot of it was political. So there's a big, and that's another thing.
It always comes down to politics.
But there's this narrative that goes around that there was like a pagan purge in Europe. That was actually created by the little mustache men. That false narrative of history, and that was done as a recruitment tool. So that was done that you're a pissed off, angry kid, and you're being oppressed. It's been going on for centuries. I'll show you who to fight.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And it's a way of getting an angry kid recruited.
So why, if that's the case, then why did?
Well, there was destruction of temples. So, absolutely.
Well, hold on a minute, though, man. Go back. So, if that was the case, and the angry, mustache man of 1940s and 1930s, why were they so apt to, take some of those symbols?
Because there's power.
So
wait, the Swazi. Let's go to that.
You're against it. You're against the people, but then you're going to steal their part of their culture by bastardizing.
Absolutely. But here's the thing, right? So we all know the Swazi, right? I hope everybody that's that's watching understands what I'm saying. I cannot say the word, right? But we know what the Swazi looks like. So the Swazi is peace and love. When you flip it and go the other way, it's peace and love in Buddhism.
Which it wasn't an.
And it was also a representation of Odin
in every culture.
It's in every culture.
Okay.
It's in every culture. It's a powerful symbol. There's power in it.
Think about how simple it is.
Right.
Just
yeah.
Make a cross and bend it.
Right, and I understand that, and so I get that. But what I'm saying to you is, if they were so against it and they were trying to purge them,
because
then why would they?
Well, they came up with the purge narrative to recruit people to them, saying, "Hey, we were oppressed too. We're going to show you who the enemy is, and it's the people that aren't your melatonin color. They're not your belief system." And they've been doing this to us for centuries.
So
they've been doing,
and a lot of them believed in the writings of this guy named Guido von
List. Right. There's a cult, 19th century occultist.
Yeah,
late 1800s.
He was writing really close to the 40s.
Okay.
He was writing in the late 18th century,
late 19th century. Yeah.
And one of the books that he wrote was The Religion of the A People.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
You. Yep.
And
a guy named Ryan.
A lot of the guys that were in, a lot of influential guys that were in that army and in that political movement were really adherents to his writings.
Right. And his writings trace. So why all of the Viking stuff was, all the Norse symbols were appropriated to it, was because there's this whacked out narrative that the perfect people, a guy named Ryan, right?
Yeah, we're blonde hair, blue eye.
Right. Yeah, those people are traced back to the Vikings, who were traced back to the Atlanteans. That's what they believed. And that was
Guido von List said that
right,
they were the descendants of God.
Right. And then it was picked up by the other guy who was 2 H's. I think you can say his name and you're not really in trouble, but it's Heimler.
Yeah.
Him, he was like in charge of their
Yeah.
mythology and their belief system and their occultism.
Now he also created one of the tattoos that
The black sun.
we're gonna show it, and it's these two agreed that we could show it. I'm not 100% sure. So
No, you can't.
YouTube, I'm sorry, but he created this, and there are people out there that get this thinking that they're getting some, Viking tattoo.
If you see this in any incarnation, those people have non-inclusive ideology,
Right?
Unless they were an idiot.
Unless they're
Right.
an idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, because you gotta look.
But even then,
you
like,
gotta give
covered up.
But you gotta give some people the benefit of the doubt that they're just dumb.
And really, Buck, like you.
There also is people too that have some of these tattoos that they had that ideology and they came around. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you do have to understand that, like, and Jason will agree with me. I mean, 75%, 60% of everything that's written, everything that's on Google is just
bullshit.
Bullshit.
Dumb.
Yeah.
Dumb.
It's just people that were like, well, this is what I think it is, but they try to present it as facts.
Right.
So
I mean,
you do have to be careful.
Yeah, even with me, like when I'm doing my history stuff, right? So I'm
sifting.
Yeah,
what's right, what's
but
true.
I'm also going, hey man, this is my interpretation, or this is what I understand,
right.
Or I just don't know. And then what I've also started to do was I actually am at the point right now where I have citations for everything.
Right. So that's what I do. I quote sources anytime I come up with information. I quote sources.
Hey man, here's my citation.
Go talk to him.
I didn't write it.
But if you're putting a marking on your body, I'm not putting a citation on me that in permanent ink.
Dude,
I mean, never know.
Let's be fair.
I have a whole bibliography down your leg.
There's
no Wikipedia page.
There's tons of people out there that are getting tattoos that they just think they look cool and they have no clue what they're talking about. It goes beyond Viking stuff, though.
Yeah, if you do a Google search on if you do a Google search on Viking symbols, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first
helmet of awe, wayfinder.
Yep, absolutely.
They're presented.
But one of the things too is if you come up with put in Google Viking morals, you come up with the 9 Noble Virtues, which is a behavioral guide for a problematic WS hate group. Like that's the 9 Noble Virtues have nothing to do with Norse paganism. But if you put in Viking Code of Conduct, that's the first thing that comes up. And it's there's a lot of misinformation. One of the reasons I started the brand that I have is to give this correct information, or as correct as I believe it to be, and as academic as I possibly can get it. One of the best things that I've ever heard one of the best stories, and I always say this story, especially when it comes to any kind of tattoos and getting symbols that you're not familiar with. I worked with a girl. She was half Puerto Rican and she was half Japanese, right? And her mom was absolutely gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Her mom was from Japan, and her mom was fluent in Japanese in the writing, right? So she's in the elevator at her job, her mom's in the elevator at work, and they're on the way up, and it's a Monday morning, and three women get in the elevator, and they're like, oh my God, what'd you do this weekend? She's like, oh my God, I got a tattoo. And she pulls it up, and it's, what's that writing, the Japanese writing?
Kanji.
What?
Kanji.
No, but what's it called, the writing?
Kanji.
No, I took what they painted. All right, kanji. So she gets the Japanese symbol, and she's like, it's a Japanese symbol for strong, powerful woman. And the girl I worked with's mom looks over and she goes, no, it's not. This is a symbol for Lady of the Night. Which, Jesus, I mean, dude, kind of a strong, powerful woman. It's upon interpretation.
Yeah, man.
Google is not your friend when it comes to permanent markings.
No, man. And there's the memes that go around where it's like the Chinese girl that has the, soup or whatever on her. You know what I mean? Because the Chinese people were probably making fun of.
I mean, there is a pretty famous story
that are like,
yeah.
There is a pretty famous tattoo story that's local to this area that a guy just took down some stuff off a menu.
Oh man!
And assigned.
So somebody's walking around with like pork fried rice.
Yep.
On his arm.
Yeah. Assigned meanings.
And he just made up meanings for it.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, basically what Guido von List did with the runes.
And what Mike Malone did the same thing with he created this. He created Hawaiian tribal.
Right.
He created Hawaiian tribal, but then he, by the time he left Hawaii, he was tattooing the grandkids of the people that he tattooed in the beginning.
So it became part of the
culture. Who were like, I want to get the tattoo that my grandfather had.
Right. Yeah.
And the big secret was that Malone just
made it up.
Just sort of made it up.
No, but then you go to the opposite though, where Leo Zaletta actually didn't he do like some heavy duty research before he came up with his
Zaletta did, and so did Hanky Panky.
Yeah.
Hanky Panky did a lot of traveling in Polynesia and Southeast Asia.
Right.
Yeah, there was one point where he took who's the guy that sings for the Red Hot Chili Peppers?
Anthony Kiedis.
He took Kiedis, and I think he took him into Thailand. Because Kiedis wanted to meet.
Authentic.
And Kiedis got dysentery and ordered a helicopter.
Wow.
Yeah. I've heard that story.
Ordered a helicopter.
Yeah, I've heard that story.
And Hanky Panky thought it was hilarious. Like, we marched into Thailand, and this, this guy,
the rock star,
because he had a stomach ache.
Yeah, I got to get a helicopter to get out of here.
Had a helicopter come in and get him.
Because I drank the water.
So, we're gonna bring it back into the whole world of tattoos here and say, okay, so you gave me another slide to show everybody of a perfect example of what the right version is and what the wrong version. So
Absolutely.
We're gonna throw that up on the screen now so you all can see that.
So this is Althala on top, which is a Norse rune, and it is from the Elder Futhark. And then down below it is the same rune with a little alteration to it, and it becomes a hate symbol.
Right.
And, and it is, that was actually used by the little mustache men for a certain order that, is the same thing that the guys in the white shiny armor in Star Wars are called. So it was like a certain regiment had that symbol on them, in the Empire in Star Wars, if you understand what I mean.
Gotcha.
So that was one, even the lightning bolts, I guess we'll call it, right? We could say that, right? So that is 2 runes called Sawillo. It's double. It's a double rune, which is another thing. Now people are getting runic tattoos, and now remember this. The runes are a phonetic language. So if you were to write the word Russian, right, with 2 S's, you wouldn't put a double Sawillo, because you're not going to say so. It's not Russia shin. You know what I mean? That's not the way. It's a phonetic language. So there's never double runing. Runes aren't doubled up that way because they're it's a spoken, it's not matched the way you see. And that's another thing is as Americans, it's very hard for us to wrap our heads around that kind of stuff because of the fact that we're so used to this representative, language. Whereas the best way for me to describe the runes for people is that I always use is if you took Egyptian hieroglyphics and Egyptian alphabetic language, right, Kemetic language, right, and you put the 2 of them together, that's what the runes are. They're a representation of a symbol, but they're also a phonetic pronunciation. So it's difficult as an American to get your head around that. What we call deconstruction in the path, right? You got to deconstruct all this Western ideology that's in our heads, right? So the point of it being is is there any? First off, all right, can I get a Ragnar Lothbrok tattoo? The one he had. First off, we don't even know Ragnar Lothbrok was if furry pants actually even existed. We're not even sure if he was an actual historic person. We think it was an amalgam of 4 different people, 4 different Ragnars throughout history that were just badasses, and all became one giant badass.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. One had a badass story, the other one had a badass story, and it just became one giant badass Ragnar with 10 sons for across 3 different centuries. You know what I mean? So it's not. It's difficult. And here's the other thing. We actually. So the Vikings, the Norse pagans, the Nordic people, they had their own Library of Alexandria. and it burned in like the 1500s. Like there was this huge depository of information of their actual written papyrus papers and parchment papers, and the whole freaking thing burned down. So the only thing we had left was the rune stones. You know, that's the only thing we have, and we have the oral tradition.
So now let's take it a step further to the future. Let's say now, right?
Well, so yeah, we're modern, right?
Modern times.
We're not running around with axes and shields anymore.
Somebody wants to. That was weird.
That one,
yeah,
that bad. You said it wasn't charged, right?
So somebody wants to get a tattoo now that's Norse inspired or that's factual. What are they talking about? We talking about like animals, runes? What else?
I mean,
there's different knots, right?
So Norse inspired would be the best. That would be the best way to say it.
Exactly.
Right.
Norse inspired.
Get actual.
Because, for instance, even on the rune stones, right? There's no set way that they wrote anything.
There is, because there's runologists. There's people that have PhDs in this stuff.
Some rune stones are written from right to left,
or left to right,
left to right. Some are written back and forth,
and
they have to puzzle out
or down.
They have to puzzle out the meanings.
Right.
So not everybody's going to get these.
It wasn't a unified language. There wasn't a university for it. That's the thing. Like it's not like how English was.
All right,
like,
but I'm still. We're
still. So I would get incorporate runes. So like if you want to, all right. So modern day, right? When we talk about like assignment of Feyu, right? So the first F in the futhark, right? It means we associate modern day as a symbol of wealth. Why do we associate it as a symbol of wealth? Because the word Feyu to this day in modern Icelandic still means cattle. And back then, cattle was a symbol of wealth.
Okay.
So, like we associate that. There's been a modern assignment because of what it is. Like, so yeah, can you get these modern assignments of these from these occult runic things? You can, like, absolutely. Like I try my practice. I try to do academic. I use runic magic. I'm not going to say I don't. You know what I mean? Like I write things in runes. Like I use bind runes. Are they historically accurate? Not 100%, no.
Okay.
But it's my spirituality. It's my practice. So I'm going to do it, what I feel is right with me, but I'm not going to tell people in public that this is historically accurate. You know what I mean? It's my UPJ. You know what I mean? Unverified personal analysis is my way of doing things. So, like, if you see a symbol that's cool, right? And you want to get it tattooed on your body, right? You want to get like, hey, man, that looks badass to me. Like, go do it. Just do yourself a favor and do some research and make sure it's not associated with a hate group. If you're not,
this goes to every other conversation we have, and it doesn't matter if it's Vikings, if it's whatever. You should always do your research before you get something tattooed on you, because you're going to wind up getting something that's jacked up.
Or get you jacked up.
Yeah.
Like, So, funny story. There used to be Tattoo Magazine, right? It wasn't like Skin and Ink or International Tattoo Art. It was Tattoo Magazine. And at the end of Tattoo Magazine, they had a couple pages with Flash. So I found a tattoo in there of a screaming tribal face, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. And I tattooed it on the back of my head, right? So some other people that thought that it was the coolest thing ever were a prison gang out of Arizona. Right? So I'm watching like a documentary like Gangland, and I'm like, wow, I guess they had the same tattoo magazine that I did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, here's the thing. Like, I'm Irish and Norwegian, right? I'm Irish and Scandinavian, right? I have a ton of shamrocks on my arm. If I go inside, I got to cover that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without permission. I got to cover that.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? And it's my heritage.
You better hope you got time to cover it.
So,
or I got to just say, like, or I have to talk to them and say, hey, listen, I'm Irish, bro. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, or they're going to remove it for you.
Yeah.
So if
I'm trying to rep, right? From what I understand. I don't plan on going to prison, but
if people want to get Norse tattoos today, genuine Norse tattoos, there's thousands of examples of art. There's pottery, there's jewelry, there's the rune stones, and then like who comes to mind immediately is Pat Fish, out of California.
Okay.
She designs her own Celtic and Norse sort of knotwork, and it's beautiful.
You got Northern
Beautiful
Black
work.
too. He's a tattoo artist in Scandinavia, and he goes by Nordic Black on TikTok, and he has books upon books that he has put out of what are traditionally Norse inspired, tattoo styles or
Right,
tattoo
but the key word
beliefs.
is inspired,
Inspired,
not
traditional, right?
right, factual,
So
traditional.
one of the few exceptions to that actually is Thor's hammer.
Mjolnir.
Like we know for certain
The symbol was used.
that Thor's hammer was worn widely.
But here's the thing, though, right? It was mostly worn by women. And it was mostly worn historically. It was mostly worn by women, and it was worn as not a buckle. It was they used a brooch. They used to use a brooch for their capes, right? For their hooded capes, and the Mjolnir was mostly worn by women because it was a symbol of fertility.
Right.
And once Christianity hit Scandinavia, it was a way of contradicting the cross.
Yeah, it was a way to sort of identify yourself.
Right. Now it became fashionable to wear. I have a Mjolnir on me and a Yugen and Munin. So like, is that something that can be Yugen and Munin, right? Odin's ravens. We know that that's traditionally Norse, right?
Mhm.
Freya and her cats. Like, get a cat drawn chariot. You know what I mean? Want to get one of the gods or the goddesses, right? Absolutely, that is traditional Norse inspired, tattoos. Like one of the things that like one of the things I had on my hand, I had runic style savage, you know what I mean? But it faded. I did it in rehab. We're not going to talk about that. But that you can use like, even when I write like my name now, right? And I write Jay Savage, I write it in a runic style. I use straight lines in it, and that's just my way of like representing what I believe, you know what I mean? And so there's ways of doing it. There's creative ways of doing it, but like, once again, it always will go down to doing your research. Like, I know many a heathens that, like I don't even wear a hammer anymore. I don't wear a Mjolnir. I mean, this is an axe of Perun, right? And this is a very little known Norse artifact that's attributed to the lightning strikes. It was attributed to Thor. Some folklore say that it was Thor's weapon before he acquired Mjolnir, before Loki, had to get it from the dwarves. And there would be these lightning strikes, and and I got a whole story on my page about how I believe that Odin manifested in physical form and gave me that. Like, I'm not going to, you're doing a lie detector test and I'll pass that. But could you get a berserker axe? Could you get, a wolf head? Like, you know what I mean? If you want to get like, the wolf style berserkers, like there's so many beautiful inspirations that you can draw from the stories. And the biggest thing is to do the research.
There you go.
First off, if you're watching this because you're into Vikings or you're starting on the path of Norse paganism, right, as a spirituality, like, it is a path of homework.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a path of homework. Like, I have read so many translations of so many different works and so many second source evaluations of a second source a tertiary sources evaluation on a secondary source's primary translation. Like, it is so much work to do, and it's so much work, but it's a beautiful thing once you get to where I feel I am with the heathen mindset, and the world around you kind of changes, and so that's a beautiful thing. So if you're on that path, keep going on it. I encourage that.
So one of our listeners, Stephen Street, said that plenty of petroglyphs in Sweden, Danish museums in Copenhagen, and then Colin Dale in Copenhagen.
Yes.
So there's plenty of sources for you to get.
I should have brought those images. I have a bunch of images I have firsthand photos that were emailed to me from some of my followers of petroglyphs in Sweden.
And your boy Gumsy just called you out, dude. Basically,
what did he say?
He just gave you up. He said that I'm Jason's cheat sheet.
Yeah, he is. Absolutely. He's my linguistics department. Absolutely, he is. Him and Ivar are absolutely my linguistics department.
So
Like-
we're getting close to wrapping this up, man. I wanted to just say again, if you're gonna get into any of this stuff and you're looking to get something cool as a tattoo design, just do your homework, man.
Or ask a Scandinavian.
There you go. Or just get, it's real easy to look up stuff and figure out. I mean, everybody's carrying a goddamn phone.
You got a computer in your
days.
hand.
You can look it up, man. Make sure it's right. Make sure it's accurate. Don't get yourself in trouble, man. Don't get yourself put into a bad position where you get something stupid that you're going to regret. So, there's plenty of places to look, people to talk to that can help you out. And, again, I'm going to put Jason's stuff up on the screen. You can follow him on.
If you're on the path of Norse paganism and you don't know where to start, check out my channel. I post every day on TikTok. I post once a week. I try to do once a week on YouTube. It's a little more time demanding, with work and everything else like that. But I do show how to take this ancient wisdom and turn it into modern day knowledge. I mean, this ancient knowledge and turn it into modern day wisdom to the best of my abilities and my interpretation of it.
And so people should also understand that it is an evolving. I mean, they make new discoveries all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a reconstructionist.
Yeah. And there's also different camps. Different scholars will see the same thing and have differing opinions.
Differing, almost opposite opinions.
Yeah.
And while we're at it, don't forget to follow us on socials. We have Facebook, Instagram, and obviously our YouTube channels. But, I want to thank you, Jason, for coming out and hanging with us today.
Absolutely. It's a blast.
And, we're going to put the book, Jason's link to his book where he goes through the modern day Havamal.
So, yeah, can I just announce like two things that I got?
I'm giving you the time.
So right now I have available on Amazon. I have the Modern Havamal, which I said it's Odin's Guide to Modern Life, right? Odin's Guide to Life. It's my homage to Odin's words. I have a book coming out in about probably by beginning of May, end of May. It's called What is Norse Paganism? And it's it's going to be like a college 101 level textbook, 300 and something pages of just what this spirituality is about. If you're interested in that, I have an upcoming documentary that starts filming next year that starts filming in probably October, November. And it's going to be called American Heathen. I'm going to be, traveling the United States, and I'm going to be looking at people and spending times with kindreds and showing rituals and spending time with people that are absolutely involved in the spirituality and the spiritual path. And I have a children's book that's coming out very soon too, called The Viking and the Fairy, and it's teaches to teach young ones that love is love, and different people have lots of similarities.
There you go, man. So Jason's a busy guy. Go ahead, check out his TikTok, his Instagram, and his YouTube channel. I know he's working hard with his YouTube channel. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and hanging with us. I know we didn't get to a lot of comments because we wanted to give Jason enough time to explain a lot of this stuff. And, awesome show, man. Thank you again. We hope you all had a good night. We will catch you all next week, same time, same day.
Channel.
And just be safe, everybody. Have a great week. And keep your eye out for a Polynesian tattoo history episode that I have.
Stay safe.
Peace.